Growing up in the 90s, I had my hands on some of the most memorable platformer mascot character games out there. Donkey Kong, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Rayman, the list goes on and on. It was these kind of games with those types of wacky, colourful characters that stuck with me over the years as these iconic, unforgettable games that I'll no doubt look back on with fond memories for years to come. But then there's the ones I didn't remember so well, or at least the ones I couldn't remember the name of to find out what they even were. I think there's going to be a few people out there that have had this happen to them as well, where you've played a game when you're younger and you can clear as day picture it in your mind, but without the name of it you have no idea what to search for or how else to really describe it to anyone. Well, that's where we are with this, a game I definitely remember playing from my childhood, where you are a jester running around in a castle, 3D platformer style. But the thing is, everybody I ever mentioned that to would always end up telling me that I must have been getting confused with Pandemonium, a 2.5D platformer by the Gex guys at Crystal Dynamics, where you can play as a jester. And yeah, I get it, my description does match Pandemonium, and I only ever did play this other jester-themed game that stuck in my head the one time, but no, I can't shake it, I'm pretty sure it was a 3D game. Years went by and I eventually just let the idea go. Maybe I was imagining it, or maybe I was thinking of 40 Winks, because I did play that game quite a lot when I was younger, and you can turn yourself into a jester at certain points. But then, out of nowhere, I found it. When moving around some things of mine and shuffling through a few old issues of the official PlayStation magazine, there it was before my eyes, Jinx, a 3D platformer featuring a jester running around inside a magical castle. It's real! That stupid game I couldn't remember the name of is right there on the page, and I had proof of its existence right under my nose in a storage box under my bed all that time. So, naturally, the next thing on my to-do list was to look around on eBay for a copy, and here we are, world-renowned 3D platformer Jinx for the original PlayStation. Yeah, so if you're not familiar with this one, then that's likely because it wasn't released outside of Europe for some reason. Which does kind of explain why so many people had no idea what I was talking about when I asked them about this mysterious 3D jester game, but whatever, who cares, I've got it now and this is finally happening. Alright, so what have we got here? Hammerhead Limited. Yeah, I definitely didn't recognise this group by that name, but if you hit rewind you'll get to see that the studio's original name was Tales Squared, which might ring a bell, especially if I bring their original logo on screen as well, because yeah, this was the sister studio to Traveller's Tales. I'm not super into the fact that they only really make Lego games these days, but man, Traveller's Tales made some pretty good games back in their day. A lot of them were random licensed movie tie-ins, but most of those were way better than they had any right to be. And of course, how can you forget their Crash Bandicoot games? The Wrath of Cortex was okay, I guess, but Crash Twinsanity, despite being a broken mess, is pretty damn good. Anyway, yeah, Jinx. This game, released on the original PlayStation in 2003? What? Yeah, 2003. The PS2 had already been out for over 2 years at that point. Anyway, the first thing that comes up is the title screen, and I've got to say, this is a pretty good one. I like the way the music is all calm and peaceful for the boring big boy corporate logos, but then comes alive for the main title screen. And the logo actually moves around to the beat of the music too. That's actually pretty cool. I like that. The story for Jinx is really quite vague, at least if you dive straight into the game like I did. I know these kind of games don't need a lot of story to get going, but this kinda just throws you into the deep end with so many friggin' goofy sounding magical names and places that it genuinely made me laugh at how ridiculous this all sounds. You've got the guardian of the map room, Merkins, telling you about how the wicked Chaos Hex has cursed the realms of Plug. What the hell does any of that mean? And then there's talk of wind portals and chapter seals, and what are you doing, game? Why is this all coming at me in such a massive wall of text? You're supposed to show, not tell. Anyway, the story premise is a little better explained in the manual, where Jinx, the son of a powerful magician, is employed as the royal court jester when a magical curse makes the kingdom go all screwy and the royal family has been kidnapped by a big evil pirate, so the fool steps up to the challenge of saving the day. Once you get started for real, you'll pretty quickly see that this has a sort of Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 styled setup, with each set of levels gradually being given to you after you clear the previous ones. But Jinx ultimately misses out on what made those games' level select areas work so well, because here you can't pick and choose which of the 3 levels in a world you want to visit first. Instead, you just unlock each one in order, which kind of defeats the point of having such a grand hub area, even if it does look kind of nice. They just may as well have gone for a Crash or Croc styled map screen, but whatever. You've got 6 worlds, all with a different theme, like a fantasy castle, a jungle, a spooky graveyard, a sort of Egyptian pyramid world, an underwater kingdom, and a pirate town, with each world having 3 levels, and each level having a little NPC character for you to help out along the way. Helping out these guys is always optional, and in this case, I'm gonna say I'm glad they are, because they all end up being the exact same thing. You'll speak to one of them, and they'll just say something like,
"Oh no, I've lost my boxes of treasure."
Or,
"Oh no, I've lost my flowers."
and then you just go around the level and find them before returning to the NPC for some kind of reward. And it sucks how predictable these end up being, because they're all just the same fetch quest. And the part that bugs me the most about this is that the NPCs are often towards the end of a level, but the items they need won't even spawn into existence until you speak to them first, so you end up having to do a lot of backtracking to even do these, which, for reasons I'll go into later on, I could not be bothered to do. Strangely, there's no real boss fights throughout this game, at least not to separate the world you visit, which I did kind of expect because, you know, that's generally how these things go with these kind of games. You finish a set of levels and then defeat that area's boss and then move on, but no, you just kind of keep going with whatever you're doing until you reach the end of the game, where there's technically 3 bosses, but it's really more like 2, and even then, one of those remaining 2 is just a really tough regular enemy, so there's only the one boss fight throughout Jinx, which is a little strange. But once you head on in, the first level definitely has that sort of Crash and Spyro themed vibe going on, with the free reign of Spyro's controls, but the mostly linear design of Crash's levels. That said, the similarities are only on the surface level though. I mean, you can't ignore the elephant in the room, because the art style in this first area alone just screams Spyro the Dragon, with that sort of Dreamweaver styled castle, and there's a bit in this area where you'll do a Crash Bandicoot styled chase towards the camera. Everything else after that though, yeah, it's not really like either of those games, to be honest. I've seen this game called a Spyro ripoff before now, and I really think it's just because it looks like Dreamweaver's with its art style in this first world. You don't even need to play more than 5 minutes of this game to see it's doing its own thing compared to Crash and Spyro, so I don't know, I guess people calling it a Spyro ripoff just played that first level and then took the entire game at face value. And that is why I play through an entire game before jumping to a conclusion like that, but I'm still not going to, because I wouldn't have minded if Jinx did borrow some ideas from those more popular games that came before it, because the things that Jinx does do on his own could be a lot more interesting, to say the least. But before going any further, let's talk about those controls. First of all, we've got full analog support. At least for the left stick, anyway. I wouldn't get too excited about that, because I would have seriously questioned where the hell the analog support was if this game didn't have it, given, again, this was 2003 and the PS2 had been out for over 2 years at this point. Outside of the analog support, the controls here are just strange. I mean, they work, and thankfully there's not a single tank control anywhere to be seen, but I'll be damned if I don't say that most of the stuff you can make Jinx do in this game feels pretty jank. He just feels so heavy to move around for such a small guy, and the main thing that stuck with me throughout the game is that his movement speed will gradually increase to its maximum after about half a second of running, which also affects how far you're able to jump because of that momentum build-up as well, which is so weird. I genuinely don't think I've played around with a 3D platformer character like this before, and I don't mean that in a good way. For what it's worth, I think the swimming feels fine, I guess. It's nothing super noteworthy, but at least it's somewhat normal, going for something similar to Super Mario 64. But all of those main actions that you'll be doing more often, like the running and jumping, just end up feeling like there's almost a delay in place, or like everything is kind of slippery, and it's that gradual acceleration that Jinx has that's doing it for sure. A lot of times I'd make Jinx run around in circles just to make sure I would be at the maximum speed when taking a jump to ensure I would land it, but even then the jumping can be kind of fiddly because of how the camera moves about when you decide to take that jump. So yeah, we've got a jumpy platformer man game where the jumping doesn't really feel very nice. There's a bunch of times where I've had Jinx fall down endless pits when in reality the jumps are as straightforward as they could be, but it's just a little hard to see and get a feel for the perspective of what you're doing in this game at times. I mean, this could just be a me problem, but I could not shake this. You do kind of get used to how it feels after a while, but even then I still found it to feel weird even towards the end of the game, so yeah, it's kind of bizarre that a game this late in the PS1's life cycle, with so many good examples of its gameplay coming before it, one of which was made by this studio's in-house counterpart, yet it ended up all floaty and strange feeling like this, which is a real shame really. I mean, I've played my fair share of these games, so I know plenty of characters have a walk and running speed, but that's usually dependent on how far you push the analog stick. You'll get one or the other. You know, if you play Crash Bandicoot 3 or Rayman 2 and push the stick all the way over, you know that they're going to start running immediately. Here with Jinx, however, you always end up with the gradually increasing speed, even if you go straight into pushing the analog stick all the way. So, jumps like this with otherwise easy to avoid instant death pits were the #1 cause of my deaths throughout this game. And it's pretty annoying because it's not through genuine challenge, it's just the dodgy camera and movement controls that are doing it. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, then unfortunately this game also shares something in common with the original Rayman, in that it's one of those games that will fire you out of a cannon back to the opening title screen if you die one too many times. And after that happened on 2 occasions in a level that was taking me 12 minutes each time to get back to the singular jump that was killing me with these floaty running and jumping controls, no, I'm gonna do something about this. Yeah, I just found a cheat code that gives you infinite lives. And trust me, nobody should be more embarrassed than me to admit on the internet that this game, of all things, ended up being so far into the bullshit time waster side of the difficulty scale that it forced my hand into cheating just so I could get by. But, you know what? I actually don't give a shit, so... Going back to the controls though, one thing I did notice about the movement around halfway through the game actually was the D-pad, and while that does still have the stupid gradual acceleration thing which I hate, it does make Jinx run way faster for some reason. I was doing a level that had to be done on a time limit, and just for fun I thought I would try out the D-pad when all of a sudden it felt like I'd set off a rocket. Look at him go! I even did a little test for myself, making Jinx run from this line in the stonework to that wall in the distance way over there, and yeah, the results speak for themselves. The D-pad definitely gives you a higher top speed, and I have no idea why. So yeah, if you want to speedrun this game for some reason, then go for it, but make sure you're using the D-pad. You'll get through the entire game in half the time. Aside from that, there's not a whole lot Jinx can do, unfortunately. If you press the triangle button, you can activate these switches, which is something you'll be doing quite a lot of because it's one of the 3 things each level is built around. You can also use the triangle button for climbing these rope ladders, which is just the slowest
thing in the world.
I'm getting some serious flashbacks to those monkey bars from the Wrath of Cortex, but somehow this is even slower. Do yourself a favour and jump towards these and then start climbing. At least then you'll give yourself a head start. As for getting rid of enemies, well, Jinx can do a single hit with his magic stick thing by pressing the square button, which will either kill them, stun them, or just damage them depending on how tough the enemy is. You can also do a jump attack by double tapping the X button. Doing this will make Jinx slam down and creates a sort of shockwave effect. And I can't tell for sure, but I think this does more damage than just hitting the enemies, but the trade-off is, for some reason, and again I can't tell why, and I'm pretty sure this is unintentional, but you end up taking damage half the time when you use this move. Either which way, I ended up just ignoring most of the enemies towards the middle and end of the game because of how slow they are to react to your presence anyway. You can easily get by most of these guys without actually having to fight them most of the time. If you do want to fight them though, well, you have more than one option available to you with the various items and magic spells, which are all accessed through this menu, which gives me some serious Tomb Raider vibes. You'll use all of these with the circle button, and for a surprisingly long time, I didn't get what most of them did. The cherry bombs are simple enough, you can just roll those on the ground towards the enemies and they'll explode. Just be careful not to get caught up in that yourself. But the magic spells? Well, they weren't doing anything at first. With these being separated from the cherry bombs in the inventory screen, I thought that meant that these were for very specific scenarios. Like this one here, there's a tunnel of water to swim under, but the current keeps pushing Jinx back up again, so I go into the item menu and find the anvil magic spell. And I'm sat here thinking, yeah buddy, this is what it's gotta be for. You cast the anvil spell and then turn into metallic Jinx, sink down into the tunnel and get past the current that way. Yes! Absolute genius. This game is no match
For my unfathomable brain power.
Turns out I was putting too much thought into it because it's just an instant kill button. I never even considered trying it out on an enemy because, like I say, they're separated from the item that you would normally use to do that, but yeah, you just press the button and Looney Tune the enemy to death. There's a few other spells too, like a tornado and a thundercloud, but these are all pretty much variations of the same idea. You just press the button and then that thing will appear and get rid of whatever it is you're looking at. I can't really complain about these too much because, I mean, they do work as intended and they were a quick way of getting rid of some of those later enemies that you just can't avoid, but yeah, I kinda wish they did a bit more with this. I mean, that anvil idea of mine was an easy one. I came up with that off the top of my head after stealing it from Super Mario 64. And yeah, I guess that level of simplicity ends up being everywhere throughout this game really. The more open-ended level designs are open-ended in the loosest sense of the term, with them being more like 2 or 3 corridors that you have to trek down to then find a key that opens a door at the end of one of the other ones. There's plenty of times earlier on where you'll literally go down a corridor to find a locked gate which then shows you where the key is, which itself isn't that far away, so you'll just head in that general direction, press a button to get the key to open the gate, and it's just spoon-feeding you all of the information and gameplay in the most baby steps way it can a lot of the time, which is pretty underwhelming, especially because I've waited so long to play this game. And don't get me wrong, I didn't pick this game up and expect it to be the most complex game on the planet. I mean, you know, there's a colourful person on the front cover and it says ages 3 and up, but again, we had games like Crash and Spyro before this, especially Spyro. He's a kid-friendly, colourful, magical-looking mascot character where, yes, some of the Elder Dragons do give you blatantly obvious hints for things at times, but then there's a bunch of optional things where the game would just kind of let you do your own thing, you know, go off and explore, find those locked chests, or maybe then find the key and remember how to get back to the chest. Or maybe it's not even a treasure chest at all, like the Egg Thieves. You just see these guys and hear them taunting you and it's instinctive, you've just gotta go chase after him. I mean, come on, this was 2003. By this point we've got another 3+ rated game right here with Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy. This game just dumps you in a huge open world where there's loads of things to find by player-driven curiosity. In Jinx, however, it's mostly spelled out to you, quite literally a lot of the time. Not just the first time you do something, but almost every single time after that as well. I don't know, I guess I have been pretty harsh on this game so far, but on a more positive note, I can say that the presentation isn't bad, to begin with. I said earlier on that the title screen is pretty good, and I do stand by that. I like how everything is animated here to the beat of the music itself, which carries over into the gameplay because the heads-up display does the same thing. Jinx's idle animation of him just standing there swaying from side to side is also at the same pace as the music, which again, it just looks really nice. But as much as I like to point out positives with these kind of games, that is just about as far as I can go really, because I do think this game could have looked a lot better in some areas. I can't believe I'm bringing it up again, this must be like the 10th time now, but yes, this is a more recent game than Spyro Year of the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot 3. I just wish there was more to see here, with maybe some details of each world you're about to visit in the hub area before you enter, instead of having each set of levels represented by the exact same balcony each time. Again, Crash Bandicoot 3, good example of what I'm talking about there. And maybe some little cutscenes or animations for completing each level, because as it stands, you're only ever really going to see this kind of gameplay layout on screen until you reach the end of the game, where Jinx's singular cutscene lives. Yeah, this is the only one, and even then, it's only the camera that's actually moving around. Everybody else is just stood there. Hello? Anybody in there? Characters throughout the game also won't audibly talk to you at all, instead opting for text appearing on these scrolls. Which, yeah, you know, I do like the scroll effect, but again, this is 2003. Where are the characters' voices? This game has voices. This game has voices. Even this game has voices. And if there's no actual voice acting, then I would have been fine with some gibberish speak. I mean, you know, you can't go wrong with that. It worked with Banjo-Kazooie, it worked for 40 Winks, but yeah, nothing like that here either. It's just the text. And now I think about it, you've got that music in the background too. Well, I mean, it's definitely fitting with each world having its own theme, but man, this is like one of those cursed monkey paw wishes. The music sounds fine, but the tracks are really short, lasting maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes each, and the levels sometimes end up going on for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, and like I said, there's only one music track for each world theme. Not each level, each world of 3 levels has just the one music track on loop, so yeah, these happy jolly tunes can get pretty annoying when it's on loop for like 45 minutes at a time. Okay, I think I got the idea. That's enough. You can stop now. I don't need this. Please stop. Please stop. Thank you. When this happens, it really makes you appreciate when games with longer levels have a varied soundtrack where for every upbeat, energetic track, you've got a nice chilled out atmospheric one to mix things up a bit and balance things out. Again, Spyro the Dragon. Also, in the final level of Jinx, which has this sort of magical, piratey visual theme, it's got this techno-electronic music for some reason, and I just find that really funny. This isn't that bad of a music track, to be fair. It's probably the least annoying one of the bunch, because it doesn't get reused for 40-odd minutes of gameplay like the rest of them, but still, it's completely alien to the rest of the game, and whatever it's supposed to be visually representing, but whatever. Thankfully, by the time you actually hear that music, you're well on your way to finishing this game. In the final world, you'll go up against the big bad pirate captain that kidnapped the royal family in a boss fight which boils down to nothing more than getting some TNT crates into position and detonating them, which is already simple enough, but the guy can barely hit you, that is if he even tries to anyway. And earlier on I said parts of this game are spelled out to you, and in the case of the boss fights, you get a complete explicit instruction set on what you're supposed to do at every given moment, and I'm just sat here thinking, what are you doing, game? I was 6 or 7 years old when I first played Spyro 2, and sure, the bosses did provide a bit of challenge to me at the time, especially that multi-phase fight against Ripto at the very end. And while you do kind of get a hint as to how the first phase is going to play out thanks to what Zoe tells you here, at least it wasn't the friggin' Star Wars scrolling block of text giving you a massive step-by-step information dump of what you're supposed to do. What is this? After that, the pirate manages to escape, where we're then told in another dialogue box that he has teamed up with a wizard that has betrayed the kingdom. So after a second and much more tedious encounter with the pirate, where you use these cannons to defeat him, you'll fight this apparently all-powerful wizard in what seems like a totally normal fight like you would do against any of the other enemy NPCs in the entire game. Sure, he takes a few more hits than the rest of them, but none of this is framed in a way that would make you think that this is the final boss fight. But it is. I mean, say what you want about the other one, but at least the camera angle being different would kind of make you think that this was something different that you were doing, which you were. It was the game's boss fight. Anyway, once you defeat the wizard, a door opens revealing the Lost King, and then the game just ends there. Jinx becomes the new court magician, and everybody's kind of happy with how things turned out, so yeah, roll credits. It does feel like there's a vital piece of the story missing there though, doesn't it? Yeah, hang on, let me try and find it. Oh yeah, so that dark wizard at the end of the game, yeah, that was Jinx's father. So this guy just straight up killed his own dad like it meant nothing, but yeah, you know what, we'll just gloss over that because nobody else seems to care. Although, there is another wizard here in the final cutscene, so maybe this is Jinx's father, and maybe there was another wizard that was evil that just popped up at the end of the game without any explanation. I mean, that is kind of on point with the rest of the game, really, but yeah, I don't know, it never explains anything either way, so... Anyway, after that there's some talk about how Jinx could have been braver on his quest, with him yet to fulfill his true destiny. Which, I'm gonna take a guess that means there's another ending for helping out all of those NPCs with their stupid fetch quests, but yeah, I've decided not to do that because, I don't know, I've just got better things to do, to be honest. Yeah, so if you were curious about what this European exclusive, Sony published 3D platformer game was like, then there you have it. Really wasn't anything worth shouting about. I guess it doesn't help in my case that this thing has been a complete mystery to me for over 15 years now. You know, you've got this totally elusive game that nobody else seemed to even know existed until I found it, and when I played it, it's just... I don't know, it's just whatever this is. If only I picked another 3D platformer that begins with J. If I had to sum this up, I would say that Jinx is baby's first 3D platformer game, and I mean for the kids that are so young they wouldn't know any different anyway. In my head I picture it like this: a parent has bought this game for their kid so they can shove them in front of the TV to get 5 minutes of peace and quiet. But then they realise that the soundtrack is stupidly loud and annoying, and so they end up just turning the TV down to 0 anyway. You know, it's one of those kind of games. And I know it seems like I've been pretty harsh on this one, but I'm just so used to a lot of these games, while still being aimed and marketed towards children, at least offer some challenge and allow the player to either use their brain or just wander off and explore once in a while, which itself often leads to you finding stuff that can help you out anyway. But this doesn't really do any of that, which alone isn't a bad thing, because I think linear platformers can be done really well too, but Jinx is pretty much showing and telling you where to go and what to do every step of the way. So for a game that I've actually seen called a Spyro ripoff on the internet before now, I kinda wish it actually was, because at least then I would have more interesting things to say and compare it to. As it is, we've just got this totally random PS1 mascot platformer character popping up way after everybody else has already moved on to bigger and better things with the PS2, but instead of looking at everything that came before it for a massive library of inspiration to be the game I would have genuinely liked it to be, it just kind of does whatever it's doing in this disappointingly bland little way. I mean, at least when I do go back and play a game like this, it just shows how well some of its peers have stood the test of time in comparison. Anyway, yeah, that's it, apparently. After a literal 15-year search of me trying to find that one elusive game from my childhood, I was finally able to see what this fool could bring to the table. It just so happens that that table has turned and the joke was on me. It's not a very good game.